So, tell us if you would, how did you get started with your writing?
Ooh, um, the series that came out late last year, Desert Call Peace and Carnifex, and I'm currently working on the Lotus Eaters, which is volume 3. And I might run as high as 8 volumes with it. Started as a book called Rage of Achilles. And that came about because of an incident in Panama during the invasion. I wasn't there, but a friend of mine witnessed it. A woman, 5 companies of Rangers jumped in. Some of them actually crash landed into Rio Hato, which is an airstrip that runs across the Inter-American Highway at right angles. And it used to be our base till '64, and we pulled out, left it to the Panamanians. Anyway, a woman apparently got confused by the fighting, and instead of driving away from it, ended up driving towards it. Platoon of Rangers on a roadblock mission, saw the car coming fast and opened fire, and just really wasted her and her baby. There was at least one officer that I'd served with as a lieutenant in Panama who was later in, I forget which of the Ranger battalions, and even if I remembered, I wouldn't tell you. And he was really loathsome in most respects. Competent. I won't say he wasn't competent, he was, but he was loathsome. And I started thinking about, well, what if that had been my wife and kids in that car, and it had been this guy in charge of the platoon doing the roadblock that turned into an ambush? What would they have done when they opened the purse and saw the American passports? And this particular person, and no doubt in my mind, he would have buried the body somewhere and tried to pin it on the Panamanians. I think he was an exceptionally bad person, by the way. And so I started running with that story, and I eventually wrote a book. Just the first volume was just under 500,000 words, unpublishable. The only real redeeming virtues of it was I spent a good 10% of the book crapping on Bill Clinton, who was president at the time. And yes, I was actively courting court-martial. And looking forward to it, if I could get the book published, because the prosecutor would have had to have proved that Bill Clinton was every bit as loathsome as I had said he was in order to get a conviction, which would have made him guilty of violating Article 88 UCMJ also. In any case, the book was unpublishable. I'm glad it wasn't published. At the time, I thought it was a fairly patriotic endeavor. Now we're in a warning sort of endeavor of how bad things could be. Now we're in a real war. We don't need that kind of message. Nonetheless, I managed to save out of that 500,000 words, about 100,000 words that popped up in A Desert Call Peace and Carnifex. And I'm going to use about another 50,000 of what's left in the Lotus Eaters. Anyway, that's how I started. I wrote that, tried to shop it, couldn't get it published. The next one I wrote was The Amazon's Right Breast, which was same universe, but it was about turning women into infantry. It had started as nonfiction. I wrote in about an 80,000 word book I wrote in law school. When I was done, I didn't like it. So I just put it aside, kept my notes. I think I still have an original copy of it. And it was about giving the PC crowd exactly what they claim to want in the least PC way that I could imagine. I'll give you an example. There's a scene in the book. The book is about turning women into infantry. Okay. Now, one of the problems with turning women into infantry is that their trainers are going to be men, presumptively straight men. I don't believe straight men on average would be able to discipline women properly. So in the book, prior to raising a regiment of women, the character raised a regiment of married gays. Not because he really cared about them, but because they could train the women without, just melting at those fluttering eyelashes and cute little buns and jiggling boobs. Early scene, one of the gay trainers, a guy named Franco, has all the girls lined up in the barracks, sitting around, and he passes out red felt tips and takes one himself and says, "Draw a dotted line here. Now draw a dotted line here." And he says, Women act out suicide a great deal, make gestures and such like, but you fail to follow through so regularly. I'm forced to question your competence as a sex. Passes out razor blades and said, if you get the urge, cut along dotted line.
While we're talking about your universes, tell us a little bit about the universe of the Caliphate.
Caliphate is set mostly in the early 22nd century, and there are flashbacks and interludes to starting in April of '03 and running through about somewhere in 2020, I think it was. The interludes are about Europe's lack of center, lack of self-confidence, leftism, urge to cultural and civilizational suicide. And that's told mostly through the viewpoint of a young, typically post-nationalist European or German female artist who has a Muslim live-in boyfriend, and is the great mother who's really the one who's really the main character of the main story. Her great great granddaughter, named Petra, who is sold as a slave at the age of 9 to pay her family's jizya, the special poll tax on non-Muslims, and then later resold at the age of 12 after she's raped. And of course, that rape was plainly her fault. Resold as a prostitute, and she serves as a prostitute from about age 12 to age 17. Until she's finally rescued by an American who is an ex-West Pointer, who is in Germany to destroy a biowarfare project, disguised as a South African. The universe of it is there's two caliphates. There's the Caliphate, which is Europe, and although I don't say so, parts of the Mediterranean coast of Africa. The Caliphate of Islam Triumphant, which is a radioactive wasteland. The Chinese hegemony, the Russian Empire, the American Empire, which still has the forms of a republic, but is not a great deal like the republic we have now. I mean, it's genocidal, xenophobic. It's kind of everything that liberals claim that George Bush is now, but really. There's also an interlude in there with a history of how we got that way, and should I give spoilers?
Up to you.
All right, what the hell. I don't want to get this timeline wrong, but if memory serves, in 2015, 7 nuclear weapons are brought in, some by sea, some across the Mexican border, and some from the Canadian border. 3 of those work. By the way, let me interject. Personally, I think Al-Qaeda probably has 6 or 7 nukes, and my guess would be 2 or 3 of them would work. Boston, Kansas City, and Los Angeles are the ones that work. The then president, who is female, but I did not have Hillary Clinton in mind for that particular one. I stand, in my loathing for Hillary Clinton, I stand behind no man. But personally, I think if we got nuked and Hillary were the president, she would obliterate the Islamic world. No, I was thinking more along the lines of Dianne Feinstein, actually. Some really left-wing loon who would really think it was our fault that we got nuked. Anyway, she fails to retaliate, which leads to the rise of a new political party led by a fanatic who is competent and rational, but not sane. And he changes the United States radically, using the pardon power as a power of summary execution, actually. And we invade Canada because they won't secure the border with us adequately. I mean, we're Canada's last line of defense, but it's their misfortune that we're they're our first line of defense. And if they fail, we have to defend ourselves. And he launches a nuclear strike on the Islamic world with the provision that 10 cities must be destroyed for every one of ours, at least 10 cities, that we must kill at least 100 of them for every one of ours that we lost, that Mecca and Medina are to be completely obliterated, and that every country that had a representative in the group that used nukes on us is to be nuked at least once. And between half the missile loads of roughly our Trident, most of our Trident fleet, about 450 odd warheads, I think, and the breakdown in what passes for civilization, increase in disease, starvation, dehydration, et cetera, kill about 800 million Muslims in retaliation. The survivors then flood Europe, which accelerates Europe becoming Islamic. Europe breaks diplomatic relations with the United States. So does Canada. That's one of their mistakes, because since they're not talking to us, we have no reason to have any confidence in them. One, cross-border operations, all the excuse we need to roll in. That's actually what caught Mark Stein. Mark Stein reviewed the book. And it's hard to say what he thought of it. I mean, I think he found it horrifying, actually. But I guess he kind of liked it.